let's get started, and we're going to have a great time in the next 2 hours. We will talk about how we effectively plan, track, and control projects with a brand new Microsoft Project 2010. This product was officially launched back in May, and we'll definitely see how we can take great advantage of this as project managers and really practically use it throughout the different life cycle of a project. So what we're going to do in this 2 hours, really I'm going to go through a lot of demonstration with you, but I'm going to give you step-by-step techniques, tips, and we're going to go through some examples on how you can, first of all, get started with Microsoft Project by telling it what your project parameters are. Do you know the project start date, or do you know the project finish date? So we'll definitely get to look at that. We'll talk about how you utilize relevant project calendars. Calendars are very, very important in Microsoft Project, and we'll see the relationship of what a project calendar does to a resource calendar, to a task calendar. We'll talk about all that. We'll talk about task and dependencies, which is very, very important in any project. We'll look at estimates as well. And one of the biggest misunderstanding with this tool is a lot of folks would use the duration column and put in their estimates there, which might be valid in certain cases, but it's not true for all instances. So we'll talk about that, how you properly put in estimates in your project. We'll talk about resourcing and task assignments. And let's see, Harry says, my audio is louder. I'm really as far as from my mic as I can. Not sure what else I could do here. Let's see. Perhaps very muffled? Okay.
Yes, I think we can tweak
Catherine,
it.
do you mind if I call back? Because I don't want to go through 2 hours. How do I sound to you?
Well, you sound great to me because I'm on the telephone also, but I was listening on my other computers, and it does sound a bit muddled. But I just actually adjusted our settings, so try saying a few more words, and let's get some feedback.
Okay, perfect. As Catherine mentioned, if you can jump on the conference bridge, I think that would be great. And I think what's happening is converting my voice to, okay, now it's good, okay? Do I sound like a DJ now? All right? Okay, good, thank you. Okay. See the wonders of technology, how it can change people's voices, right? Okay, anyway, so going back. We'll talk about how we outline resources and specify task assignments, and also look at who's doing what when. And we'll look at the other piece of Microsoft Project, which helps us track project actuals against project baseline information. You see, folks, this is one of the things that people do not take advantage of. Every time I talk to people who's using Microsoft Project, they're not really using it. What they use Microsoft Project for is they create a nice little schedule with a nice little Gantt chart. They print it out, give everybody a copy, and that's the end of it. Well, that's a shame because you're not really leveraging the power of this wonderful platform since you can actually track against it. So we'll look at that. We'll talk about how you create relevant reports for stakeholders. So I'll show you different reports that's built into the tool, but I'll also show you custom reports that you can build for yourself. And then I'll talk about briefly how you integrate Microsoft Project 2010 with SharePoint 2010. That's a great platform. It's another passion of mine, so I'll show you how these two interact with each other out of the box. And last but not the least, we'll talk about how you manage multiple projects with shared resources. I know a lot of folks, if you're like me, not only do you juggle a lot of projects, but most likely you're working on the same set of resources. So look at how we could have a consolidated view of multiple projects using the same set of resources. Okay. So with that being said, quick background on myself. I'm a managing partner with Innovative E. We're based out of DC and Atlanta. I authored a book for O'Reilly Media, SharePoint for Project Management. And there's my contact information. Don't be a stranger. Drop me a line, send me a tweet, connect me on LinkedIn. And I blog regularly about project management, SharePoint, Microsoft Project. So again, feel free, reach out. I'll be more than happy to engage in a dialogue with you. Okay? So with that, thanks again for joining us today. I want to get started because, like I said, this is a jam-packed 2 hours, and we'll certainly have a break at 2 o'clock. but I want to show you a lot of great demonstrations as I step through this process. So this is the agenda for the afternoon, and I want to get started talking about Microsoft Project 2010 being a project management tool. And what I want to focus on, at least initially, is really get into the mindset of getting our priorities in order, even before we look at the tool. So for example, let's say I have a dream house, that's my project. So I guess I'm going to buy a piece of land, and right after I have my land, I'm just going to go to a hardware store and start buying drywalls, tools, and start building it. Is that how it goes, friends? Yes, no, maybe? Do you agree? Just start buying stuff as soon as I have a piece of land? Yeah? Yes, exactly, no? Well, I could do that, but here's the problem. If I just bought a piece of land with really no vision, no idea of what this house would look like, right? I could aimlessly build this house, but guess what? Most likely, it's either going to be over budget, I'm not going to build the right house, and it might not even be livable. So the point being is, realize that Microsoft Project is a tool. It's your drywall, your tools, all that good stuff. They don't run projects. They don't make projects perfect. Initial planning is necessary prior to using the tool. Absolutely, I agree with you, Laura. It won't be my dream house. Because for a dream house, even before I start telling people to build it or use all these nice tools, what do I have to do? I have to work with upper management, in this case my wife, figure out what our budget is, where we want the house to be. We want it to be by the beach, what the kitchen would look like. We want, Corian countertops. No, not Corian, maybe granite. How many bedrooms? So we spend all that time discussing that and identifying and agreeing what the priorities are before we even start building, right? And I say this because there is a misunderstanding especially in the project management world, saying, okay, hey, Joey, go work on this project. Knee-jerk reaction, you fire up Microsoft Project and start cranking away. I'm not saying everybody's like that, but I've seen a lot of people like that, which shouldn't be the case. So you got to get your priorities in order even before you touch the tool. And I'll talk about the tool now. So next, and how to get your priorities in order, at least at the high level, you've got to define what success means in a project. Because if you don't know what success means, how would you know if you've achieved it or if you've met it? You see, projects have certain limits or constraints. There's no such thing as a perfect project. All projects are bounded by time, cost, or some kind of functionality. Let me give you an example. So let's say your boss or your customer walks up to you and say, hey, Fernando, I'd like you to build a $10 flying car in 2 weeks. $10, that's your cost. Flying car, that's a scope. 2 weeks, that's the time. You might be saying, well, that's crazy, You can't do that. Well, that's exactly my point. When your customer, your boss comes up to you and say, look, build a flying car for $10 in 2 weeks, your job as a project manager, as a leader, as a person being told to do that, is you got to do your homework and you go back to this customer and say, what's a priority? What's important? Because we can't do those three. If you want a flying car, $10 won't cut it. We got to hire the best NASA engineers. If 2 weeks is critical, we can't have a flying car, nor $10 won't cut it, right? So you got to figure out what's the number one priority. You can't have everything as priority. And once you identify that, this will guide you in all your decision making as you start working on the project. So with that being said, let's talk about Microsoft Project 2010. So like I said, you got to do your initial planning, identify what the priority is, what success means. Here's where the tool can help you. It's a tool that supports schedule development, so we can develop schedule during planning. We can look at that schedule and track against it and maybe update it. I saw people who signed up for this session. There's quite a few folks asking about agile projects. So I'll talk about that later. And then you can use this tool to help you control the project too and forecast what's going to happen based on certain events, right? So if you're 5 days behind on task ABC, it's going to help you forecast what it might look like if the project keeps on going that way. It's also very, very powerful in supporting you around resource management. You see, especially today, there's a lot of dynamics in projects. Not only do you get internal folks, you get external folks, and it's rarely you get full-time people working on one single project. So that alone is a challenge in itself. So this tool can support and help you. And then reporting. Reporting is big. And then second, which is important, this tool assumes that you're familiar with some fundamental project management process. I don't know about you. What was your first experience like when you first fired up Microsoft Project? You see, before I was doing this, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago, I was actually a programmer. And when I first fired up Microsoft Project, I'm like, yeah, how bad could this be? You know, I know Word, I know Excel. What's a big deal with Project? So when I first opened it up, I kind of saw like a table. It's kind of like Excel, but then I was stuck for the next 2 hours. I'm like, okay, what do I do next, right? So it just dawned on me through the years is it assumes that you have some fundamental project management process. And that's key. And we'll go through a process, in fact, in these 2 hours. So if you want to learn more about Microsoft Project 2010, go ahead and just go to that link, and Microsoft has more details about this new version of the tool and all the great features and whatnot. So certainly what I want to cover in this presentation is looking at this tool on how we can use it in a typical project lifecycle. This is not a presentation about what the new features are. It's not a presentation of how it's different than the old version. My goal for you is in the next 2 hours, you walk away here being able to take this tool to help you plan, to help you track, to help you analyze and control the project, and lastly, generate relevant reports. So that's the intent of this presentation. But certainly if you have questions, feel free to drop it in on the chat pod, and during Q&A later, I'll be more than happy to address it and answer it. Okay? Okay, so what are the key steps in utilizing Microsoft Project 2010? So really going through this process as I was describing, Microsoft Project 2010 is a very powerful tool that can help us plan. And those are the steps in planning, which we'll go through. It's great once we start running the project. It can help us track progress of the project. And also it allows us to analyze and control the project based on what's been happening. And then last but not the least, it can support us in generating reports for relevant people. Okay? And we'll go through all that. I'll show you a lot of examples. So let's get started with project planning. So for project planning, one of the big things, as I described in the first slide, is even before you start touching this tool, you got to have some kind of initial work breakdown structure. Okay? It has to be developed prior to utilizing project. A work breakdown structure is the deliverable-based grouping of project tasks. And this is a very effective way to define and organize all of the work required to complete a project. So this is just an example of like building a house. So in building a house, you see all those boxes down there. Those are some of the work packages, as they would call, that need to happen. Then certainly I can break down more activities or tasks. So we can talk about what does it mean by selecting location, maybe do a research, ask neighbors or whatever. So you can break it down further. And I have a webcast, an hour webcast, just going through this concept further on that link on Project Planning 101. So let's go and do this, okay? So I want to do like a live example as we go through this 2 hours. So let's say we need to build a WBS. Let's say the project is to open a restaurant. I know it's a simple example. We'll talk more about complex examples later. But that's the project for these 2 hours. So help me out here, everybody. What does it take to open a restaurant? Give me some high-level work packages. You know, throw it in the chat room. Just give me some high-level tasks of what do we need to do to open a restaurant. Okay, thank you, Mark. Find a location. Funding, very good, Carl. Thank you. Let's see, funding, permits, theme, license. Beautiful, okay. All right, I've got hire chef. Determine how much you paid. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we've got all these WBS. They're good to go, thank you. Let me move on then to the first step. So moving on, if we look at step one, right? If we look at step one, let's see. Before we look at step one, I should say, one of the first key things that we have to be familiar with is the Microsoft Project 2010 interface. So now that we have WBS, we're ready to use Microsoft Project, but before I jump into it, I want to give you a tour of the interface. So what I'm going to do right now is I'll switch the screen, so you'll see your screen flicker a bit, but I'm going to switch the screen to my demonstration machine, okay? And let's see. Okay, I'm going to share my computer screen, and I'll leave it up throughout the presentation. Okay. So everybody should start seeing my Windows desktop. Okay, so what you're looking at now is, thank you. So what you're looking at now is my desktop, and notice that you have I have a shortcut of Microsoft Project. Very good. So somebody's asking if this could be applied to 2007. Absolutely. The process I'm going through is applicable to 2007, although later I'll show you certain things that doesn't exist in 2007. So I'm going to go ahead and double click, and there it is. There's Microsoft Project 2010. If you're comfortable, or if you've seen the prior versions of Microsoft Project, this looks totally different. You see, with the new Microsoft Project 2010, it's consistent now with all the other Office products, and it has what's called the ribbon interface. So let me give you a quick tour of the interface. So all the menus up top uses what's called the ribbon interface. So it's seamless, and it's more usable, and it's easier access to all the key elements that you need when you work with Microsoft Project. Now, you have to be familiar with the interface, and that's what I learned early on if I want to take advantage of this tool. So this top part, let me go through it with you quickly. This top part is our standard ribbon interface, and each tab would represent a menu selection. And just some quick pointers here. If you're working with Microsoft Project, regardless of what version it is, the Task tab, Resource tab, and Project tab, those would be your best friends, I tell you. Because no matter how small or how large your or how large your project is, you're definitely going to use these three tabs all the time, okay? So this would be the ribbon interface, the different menus. And then beneath that, you see this timeline. This timeline section is a brand new feature in 2010. We'll get to see how it works in a while, but this is great. It gives me a visual, sort of like a dashboard view of what's going on throughout the project. And then this middle portion, this main area of the product, is known as a view. Very important. This middle thing right here is known as a view. A view is how you look at a project. And by default, what we're looking at here is the Gantt chart view. The Gantt chart view. And if you're wondering how many views there are out there, so if I click on the View tab, and notice the Gantt chart view is selected. If I click on the drop down, there's a couple other views. But the nice thing is no matter where I am, any specific view related to that tab, so like I'm in the Task tab, notice that there's a bunch of other views that show up. And if I click more views, there's actually a lot of different views available, okay? So again, just to define this, a view is how you look at your project. By default, the Gantt chart view is a default view because that's what we use all the time to interact with our project. The Gantt chart view is made up of two sections. So let me do a full screen here. To the left, this is what's known as table. And these tables are made up of a lot of different columns. And you can add a new column. There's a bunch of columns in here. So if I do a right click, insert column, notice that you have a lot of different columns you can add. And I'll talk more about this later. And the table we're looking at now, is what's known as the entry table. The entry table. So if I go back to the view here, notice that there's a table selection. Notice there's a bunch of different tables available. And what a table is, it's just a predefined set of columns. And when I say predefined, this comes out of the box, which means you can create your own table for the Gantt chart view as well. To the right of the Gantt chart view is what's called the calendar. The calendar shows me the calendar view, later we'll see this, of the task and when it's going to happen. And just so you know, a Gantt chart is an industry standard tool in project management. It was actually invented, I think, by a gentleman named Henry Gantt back in the First World War as they were planning for the war. Anyway, so that is the key sections of the Project 2010 interface. You've got your ribbon interface here for navigation, for your menus, and this middle section is your view, which we will be using most of the time. Okay? So let's go back. Let me go back to the presentation. I'll leave my screen up here. So what we're going to see in in the next section or the next slide is we're going to get started with step 1. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll talk through a couple of steps and then I'll show you demos so that way I don't have to keep switching my screen here. So the first step, once you have your work breakdown structure in place, which we do, what we're going to do first with Microsoft Project is you fire it up and you don't start typing all the tasks. What you do is you got to define project scheduling. And what I mean by that is you got to tell Microsoft Project how you want the project to be scheduled. By default, it assumes you know the start date of the project. That's the assumption. But I don't know about you. In my situation, a lot of times customers tell me, okay, Dux, I want the project by December 5, 2010. So the customer will give me the end date because time is their priority, and then I have to backtrack and figure out when I should start. So you got to tell Microsoft Project that, because if you don't, that's not the default setting, and I'll show you how you switch that. And next, after you define project scheduling, you can enter the task, and you enter the task in the Gantt chart view, which we'll see in a while. Okay, so in fact, let me go ahead and do that. All right, so I'm going to go back and fire up or display Microsoft Project, and I'm going to go and do the first 2 steps. The first step is I'm going to define the project schedule. So our project is to open a restaurant. I want to open a restaurant. That's been a big dream of mine. In case you don't know, I enjoy working with technology, but my other passion is actually cooking. So I thought that would be a good example, and everybody would appreciate that. So the first step is to define project scheduling. And how you do that is you fire up Microsoft Project 2010, click on the Project tab, and there should be a icon called Project Information. All right? So I'm going to click on that, and you should see the dialog box showing up. And this is what I'm talking about, friends. Where it says here, schedule from, by default, it's scheduling from a start date. So it assumes that you've been told when you can start, and you got to figure out how long this project would take. Now, the other scenario is when you're expected to finish. So when I flip that, you can put in the finish date. But you can't put both of them at the same time because it defeats the purpose of this tool. Microsoft Project is a scheduling engine. It's going to help you figure out either when the project will end or when it will begin. So in my example, opening a restaurant, let's say that's like a retirement project kind of thing. So in my fantasy world, let's say I'm going to start January. Well, I'm sorry, I'm picking the wrong date here. That's something else. We'll talk about that later. But I'm going to pick January 3, 2011. All right? So my project of opening a restaurant will happen on January 3rd, 2011. Okay, I'll talk about all these other pieces in a while. So once I click OK, I'm done with step 1. Step 2, I said, enter your task. Okay, I'm going to enter my task. So it's a good practice to always begin with a start task or an end task. So you put start or end, and I'll explain why in a while. And then you start entering your task. So I'm going to go back to the chat pod here because I'm going to type in all the different tasks or high-level work packages you define. So somebody said secure location. Okay, I'm going to type that in. Next, a bunch of people said define a theme. Business. Okay, so let's do this. Let's say create business plan. So what I'm going to do is in this process of creating a business plan, do my research, figure out where I want to open the restaurant, how big, how small, the food, the menu, when I'm going to start making money, all that good stuff. Funding. Somebody said secure funding. Now, one thing that you'll see, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about this now, is, hold on, Dux, that's not in the right order. Of course. You see, at this point, you don't really care of the order or the schedule. What you're doing now is you're just dumping in all the work breakdown that you've identified. But hold on, Dux. I mean, if I look at the screen, that doesn't make sense. That's fine, because later you'll see it'll fix itself. And do not be mistaken that, I got to start putting all this stuff in order. You don't have to. It's just a brain dump of information at this point, okay? So, and a bunch of people say hire chef, hire waiter. So let's say staffing. I'm going to do staffing here. Get equipment. Thank you, Bill. So, I'll just do this. Get equipment. So that's my fridge, my oven, my chairs, my tables. Let's see. Somebody said marketing, advertise, right? If I don't do that, let's do build out, because I need the place to look nice. What else am I missing here? Oh, permits. Permits is important. Thank you. I'm just kind of looking at the chat pod. Vendors. Thank you, Maureen. So, and I suspect what you mean by vendors is, the fish, the veggies, the meat, all that good stuff. Develop menu. Yeah, the develop menu, Dave, I'll stick it in my business plan. That's all part of the business plan. Okay? I guess this should be good. Is that good enough? Okay. All right. So let me put finish. So again, I'm trying to go through all this in a simple example, but later I'll show you something more complex. I want to make sure, because I'm not sure what industries everybody's from, so I hate to do an IT example here. So opening a restaurant should be good. Maureen, lunch event, let's just do, the finish. The finish is the actual opening of the restaurant. Okay. So we're all good, and I've entered in all the tasks. That is step 2, okay? So I'm going to leave it at that. Well, before I forget, let me hit save just to make sure. The save button is important. All right. So let me save this to my Open a restaurant. What do you think a good name of a restaurant would be? That should be my business plan. Open a restaurant. Munch. All right. Duck soup. No, how about this? How about pecking ducks? That sounds good, right? Okay. All right. I should go into improv, right? Okay. So steps 1 and 2. Define project scheduling. Enter your task. Next is, let's go back to my presentation, because I want to talk about step 3, which is very, very important around planning. Okay, so are you guys seeing the PowerPoint? It's not showing up on my end.
It's not showing up on mine either, Doug. Maybe stop sharing and reshare again on that spot.
Okay, I'll try that. Let's try that.
Share button there. Try resizing the window. That's a good idea. I think ducks can do this. There, here we go.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So yeah, okay. So thanks everybody. Step 3. Okay, so let's talk about step 3 here. Step 3 is now entering estimates. So here's the idea. So you guys helped me put in the task for opening this restaurant. Now it's time to figure out how long certain things would take, and that's the idea of putting in estimates. Now normally, I'm sure a lot of you have seen Microsoft Project, you would automatically go and stick in, if you look at the screenshot here, you would put the value under duration, but that's not really true all the time. Because one of the big mistakes, even myself, I'm guilty as well, is people assume you just stick numbers in duration and everything will be fine. And I'll explain why that's not the case in the next slide, but keep in mind the type of estimates you can put in. You can actually work with what's called duration-based estimate or work-based estimates. And then these are the different time units you can enter in. So you're not restricted to dates alone or days. You can use months, weeks, and minutes. So what am I talking about when I said you got to make sure you put in the right type of duration? So I want to show you an example. Oh, that E dropped down, but you know what I'm talking about, resource, right? So for example, here's what I want to do, okay? Let's say there's a task called a 10Gov 2.0 Summit, which is, by the way, coming up this September here in D.C., so for those interested. So I'm just going to make some numbers up here. Let's say this summit or this conference is 3 days, okay? So y'all should see that. Now, if let's say, let me click here. if let's say 10 people attended this conference, that's what the resource column is about. 10 people attended this conference, and typical day, 8 hours. How much work or how much effort has been consumed? Anybody? Type in the chat pod. So it's a 3-day conference, 10 people attended it. Let's say these people are just going there 8 hours a day, full-time day. How much total effort would be? Mertuza, 80 hours, that's for 1 day, that's true. But for, 3 days, right? It's 240 hours. That's correct, right? So with 240 hours, let me type that in. All right. Would that be different? How many hours in a day? I'm just talking about 8 hours a day. All right. So that's good. Hang on with me here. Now let me change my question. What if, instead of 10 people attending, in fact, I want to use a different color. Well, can I change colors? I'm trying to be fancy here. Yeah, I can change colors. What if, now I'm going to cross the line here, 100 people attended. Okay. What if 100 people attended the conference? What's going to happen? Would the conference be shorter, or would the conference still be the same? That's my first question. If 100 people attended this conference, Gov 2.0 Summit, would the conference be longer or shorter or the same? Same, absolutely, right? But what will be different? What's going to be different is the amount of effort being consumed. So if 100 people attended a 3-day conference instead of 240 hours, that'll be 2,400 hours being consumed. And if you see something like this, if you have a task that's like this in your project, this is what's known as a fixed duration task. Fixed duration, okay? So keep that in mind. So this first example, this is what's known as a fixed duration, all right? Now, this second example, paint this room. For some reason, my typing is not showing up, so just listen to what I'm going to say. I've been typing here. For some reason, it's not popping up. But the second example, paint this room. So if I get an expert painter to say, hey, painter, come to this room. I want you to measure and figure out how long this or how long it's going to take you to paint this room. If a single painter measured, figured out the size and diameter, the metrics, all that good stuff, he might tell me, well, Dux, if I paint this room, it's going to be a 16-hour job. 16-hour. Right? So if I convert that, so one resource, the amount of effort is 16 hours. So if I think about that in duration, how long it's going to take through time, 16 hours is what? How many days is that? Anybody? 2 days. Very good, Corrine. But then I go, well, painter, you know what? That's a problem because I have a party coming up. Can you do it in a day? He goes, yeah, I'm going to bring another person in. So if he brought another person in, resource would become 2, right? But the amount of effort is still the same. It's still 16. And duration would go down. Duration would now be 1 day. Resource would be 2 resources. Everybody get that? So what I'm trying to say is, in this second example, this is what's called fixed work, where the room is always the same size. And it's a task that's been done over and over again, so that's why these estimates are pretty finite. But if the painter estimated at 16 hours, if you throw more people at it, it'll get done sooner. It's like construction. You throw more people at it, it'll get done sooner potentially. However, it doesn't mean if I had 1,000 people paint the same small room, it's going to get done in like a minute. So there's always like a critical point where you're not going to get the benefit anymore. And that's the type of task called fixed work. And going back to what I'm talking about, is that the kind of task you're working with? If that's the case, you do not enter it in duration. You enter it in the work column. Okay? The last type of task is known as fixed resource. And fixed resource type of tasks are dependent on specialized skill set. So for example, developing a website. So developing a website, there's a lot of variables to that, but one of the key variables is experience. So if I ask somebody who's never done this before, hey, Michael, how long will it take you to develop a website? This person is technical, but never done that. So he might say, I don't really know. I haven't done it. Maybe I have to study it up, learn about it, and all that good stuff. You know what? It's going to take me 80 hours of my time. 80 hours, if Michael's working on it full time, that's 2 weeks, 2 business weeks, right? But if I ask Tony, who's been developing websites all his life, not all his life, but since 1995 or something, and a simple website, 3 pages, no logins, all HTML, I'll get that in 2 hours. And that's resource dependent, right? But whenever you get into this situation, you can either put it in duration or work, but here's the problem. If you put it in work, for example, so Tony said, I can get it done in 2 hours, but you have to ask now, what do you mean by 2 hours, Tony? Are you going to dedicate 2 hours to this, or are you working on something else? Well, Tony might say, you're right. It's going to take me 2 hours, but it's going to take me 2 weeks to complete because I'm working on 10,000 other things. So you have to be clear about that as well. Right? Cherry, I'll show you an example of what's going to happen. But what I'm trying to say here, friends, is before you start going in and entering all these estimates, you have to be clear of what you're estimating for, okay? Because, like I said, this is the tool. It doesn't make decisions for you. So, with that, let me go ahead and show you my screen, okay? Let me go ahead and show you my screen. And again, I'm going to switch and show you this step of putting in the right estimates. And I'll show you how you define duration or work. So this is our example again, opening a restaurant. So what I'm going to do, notice that by default, if you look at this Gantt chart, the entry table, you see the task name column, the duration column, and start, finish, predecessors, but we don't see the work column. So what I'd like to do when I'm in planning, I fire up or insert a new column called work. All I did is right-click on any column, and notice that the work column appeared. Okay. Now, Linda, thank you for your comment. Certainly, I'm going to show you Project 2010 as well, but what I see a lot, the problem is a lot of folks, they don't realize that it's important for people to understand key project management concepts before they start using the tool. So I was trying to explain that, but you see a lot more demos in a while. Okay. I need to lay down the groundwork and just to make sure everybody understands. Thank you. Okay, so I I inserted the work column. Now I'm going to put duration for start 0 and finish 0. What that means, I put the start and finish there as a what's called a milestone. And really, when you get started with a project, you get started, right? So you don't really do anything. So you could put 0 there. So what I'm going to do a combination of a couple of things, but just to show you what the effect is, all right? So securing a location. So let's say the idea of securing a location is just signing paperwork. You already got the money, signing paperwork. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to allocate 1 week for this, all right? So I'll put 1 week. And 1 week, what this does by default is it's just looking at 1 business week or 5 days. And I'll explain all that when we get to the discussion around calendars. Create a business plan instead of putting in duration. Since this is not a fixed duration task in my mind, if I'm going to do this, I can't do this full time, got 10,000 other things to do, but it's going to take me 40 hours to do. And again, 40 hours can translate to 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, but it's going to be 40 hours of my time. Secure funding, I'm going to allocate 3 months of my time to knock on doors and ask for money. I know these days, 3 months is still pretty short, but I'm wishful, right? Staffing, I'm going to allocate 20 days for staffing, and again, I'm doing all this for just to show you the different kinds or the different types of time units you can put in. Get equipment. I'm going to have them deliver, install it. That's going to take about 4 weeks. Marketing, I'll allocate 2 months to do my marketing. Build out. I know I'm going to hire Ty Pennington, and he could do it in a week if If you guys don't know who Ty Pennington is, he's I think he's doing the Extreme Makeover. All right. Permits. How long does it take me to Helen? In 2007 version, it only gives you the days for duration. No, that's not true. You can, by default, now everybody look at this. Helen has a great question. If I just enter like 4 and let go, it shows days. It defaults to days. But what I've been doing is I've been typing the first letter of the time unit. So if I said 1 week, I type 1W. Okay. So in 2007, it's exactly the same. Permits, no. 4 days is too fast for a permit. It's going to take about, I don't know, 2 months typically, I know. So 40 days, 40 business days. All right. 3 weeks. Sherry, I don't know where you live. 3 weeks is pretty fast. Sherry, I'm sorry. Vendors. Vendors, this is looking for my, who's going to deliver the fish, the meat, the veggies. That shouldn't take too long. I'll just put 5 days, okay? Okay, so that's the next step. Essentially put in your proper estimates, but keep in mind the estimates you put in should be relevant to the task. Is it fixed duration or fixed work? And that's how I'm putting it in. And that's where people get in trouble if they don't put it in the right place, okay? So let me save this guy just to make sure. So I'm done with that task. Bill, is there a setting to cause the work to be set from duration and vice versa? No. The duration column and the work column is independent of each other. By default, you don't see the work column. You have to make it show up, and the way you do that is you right-click, insert column, and pick work column. Work should be at the bottom, okay? You can insert whatever column you want. Okay, well, appreciate the props, and I'm a firm believer in back to the basics, because a lot of times we get so caught up with gadgets and tools and whatnot, but unless you know the basics, it's just going to be a very expensive tool, and people get frustrated because they don't know what they're doing. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation again. What's the next step? The next step, Helen, I'll address your question later on, but it can be done. All right, so the next step after you enter task durations or effort, let's move along here. Let's see. So we talked about estimates. The next step is we can now link our task. Now, by the way, my slide might look quite interesting, all those bubbles. I'm not sure what happened, but when I did it in PowerPoint, those are actual little solid circles, so it just became outlined when I uploaded here. But that's all good. It's so viewable. So the next step, so we defined project scheduling, we entered the task, we entered our estimates for duration or work. The next step is to link the task. Now, linking the task is the idea of establishing dependencies. And what dependencies are, just to describe to you in short fashion, is really understanding what comes first, what comes next, what comes in parallel. And there's a lot of thought that needs to happen to that, and we don't have time to discuss the details. So feel free to look at that little webcast. It's a 30-minute webcast. I explain task dependencies. There's different kinds of dependencies you could do, like a finish to start to finish, all that good stuff. Okay? So that's the next step. You got to link your task. And once we link the task, let me show you a demonstration of that. There's different ways of doing task linking. So let me share my computer screen again. Okay. All right. So here's where we're at now. Here's where we're at. Before I start linking the task, there's a new feature in 2010 that did not exist in 2007. A new feature in 2010 is this thing called the task mode. In the prior version of Project, sorry, I was about to say SharePoint. In the prior version of Project, this did not exist, and how tasks were scheduled is automated. So what I mean by that is we're relying on Microsoft Project to help us figure out when the schedule would be. So that's what's called automatic scheduling. But in 2010, they added a new feature where it allows you to manually schedule it, meaning you have an option not to let Microsoft Project automatically schedule it for you, and you can be selective as well. And this works really well because, there's certain tasks that you have a hard date that you have to meet. So having manual scheduling is really, really beneficial. But for the purposes of this example, since I don't really have any hard dates, I'm relying on the tool to help me schedule. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight the whole thing, and I'm going to go to the Task tab, and I will click on Auto Schedule. I'm going to rely on Microsoft Project to help me schedule this. So right now, after I click Auto Schedule, nothing really happened yet, but Microsoft Project will know to help schedule this thing for me, and this works really handy when I start linking these tasks. So as I look at this, somebody was asking, if you missed the URL, this whole session is being recorded, so you get a copy of this. If you register, you get a copy of this presentation. In addition, once we're done, you can download my slides, so you can get a copy of all this too. Okay? So notice a couple of things. After I set it to auto schedule, no big change except for this color here. But if you look at the Gantt chart, which I haven't really talked about earlier, if you look at the Gantt chart, the calendar portion of it, notice that right now this doesn't make any sense because notice all of them are starting on January 3rd. And the reason why that is I have not established dependencies. I haven't defined what has to happen first, what has to happen next. So that's what I'm going to do next. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. So for example, a quick way to do it is through the Gantt chart view. I can literally highlight tasks here and start linking using the link task icon. But I'm more of a visual person. I'm sure a lot of you is the same as well. So what I want to do is I'm going to click on the Gantt chart, this view selection, and go to network diagram. And I want to establish my dependencies in the network diagram view of Microsoft Project. So now this can really help me and see when things should happen and things should happen. So when I get started, I'm going to click Start. I think the first thing I got to do is create a business plan. Okay, and the way you do this is you click from the middle of the box to the middle of the next box. Because if you don't do it right, you might end up creating new tasks. And by the way, for those wondering what these symbols mean, if you have this, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 hexagon, right? Yeah. Okay. Are you smarter than a fifth grader? If you have a hexagon, that means it's a milestone. It has a 0-day duration. That's a symbol for a milestone. And if you have a regular rectangle, that's a regular task with a regular certain number of duration and or work estimates. So after I create a business plan, I can secure funding. I can knock on doors, ask for money. After I secure the funds, I can secure the location because now I got money to get me a venue or a location. Now certainly I can zoom out since the screen is not large enough. I can zoom out to kind of see all the other boxes. There you go. After I secure my location, what happens next, friends? I got the location. Let me see all my tasks here. I can, I can get permits. There you go. I need my permits first. Now, one thing for sure, once you have your permits, you can do a bunch of other stuff. Once I get my permit, I could do what? Feel free to jump in on the chat pod. I can start with the staffing. Staffing involves a lot of stuff. Putting ads out, hiring people. After I get my permit, let's see, I can get the equipment. All right? Okay. What else? After I get the equipment, I can start doing the build out. Helen, let's see. Well, the staffing involves a lot of different things. There's ads, there's interviews, so I'm just doing that in parallel. But I agree with you. I mean, they can't start working until a lot of the things are in place. But I need my equipment in before I do the build out, or else Ty Pennington will be upset. There's nothing to work with there. Okay. What else? So permits. After I get the permit, I could do the marketing anytime. So I'll just do that as well. And vendors. After I get my equipment, I can contact the vendors because I want to make sure I have the fridge before I start ordering fish, right? And I want to make sure the staff is here to help me with the vendors. Because I don't want all these deliveries coming in, nobody's helping me. So last but not the least, once I'm done, I'm going to link all these to finish, marketing to finish, vendors to finish. Okay. So this is a big point I want to make. I want to make a couple points here. So let me zoom out. Ooh, that's too small. Okay. So first point I want to make is, number one, the reason why you always have to have a start task or a finish task is because you want all your tasks to have what's called a predecessor and a successor, or else the calculation won't be as accurate. You do not want to have a hanging task. Okay? So for example, this task called create business plan, there should be a task coming before it and a task coming after it. You can't be hanging. Not like the situation in Florida way back when they had hanging. No, that was hanging chat. But anyway, so that's why start and finish is important. Start and finish is an exception. Certainly, nothing comes before start and nothing comes after finish. Now, if you're wondering, well, hold on, ducks. What if there's really no dependencies? What if there's a task like I don't know, status meetings? It just happens. Well, what you do is you take start, status meetings, finish. Okay. Now, so that's the first point. The second point is, as you can see, there's a bunch of different colors here. There's a bunch of different colors. The red indicate critical path. And for those not familiar with critical path, let me just quickly explain what it is. Critical path is the path where if the tasks get behind on this path, your project will be behind. Critical path does not define which tasks are important or not. It defines which tasks are time critical. A lot of folks do not understand that concept, and that's really, really disappointing, because this is a powerful concept, especially when you use a tool like Microsoft Project. You see, like right now, I can tell, oh man, these tasks, if I want this restaurant to be open on time, whenever that may be, these tasks can be delayed. Because anytime the task gets delayed, that's red, boom, my project is delayed. Now, most of the time, going back to my discussion around what the priority is, most of the time, schedule or time is the priority. But in some cases, schedule might not be the priority. So even if this split, no big deal, right? What qualifies a task to be critical? Again, let me define. Critical path has the task that's time critical. It doesn't mean it's important or dangerous. It means it's time critical. So if you look at this path, you see all these arrows? These are what's called paths. And this red path, any of the tasks that gets behind here, if you get delayed a day, half a day, the whole project gets delayed. Whereas these blue, they are tasks that's not part of the critical path, and they have what's called extra time or slack. So we'll find out what those are. But if you get behind maybe a day or two on these blue boxes, you're still fine. The whole project would still be on schedule. Okay? I have a whole discussion around critical path in one of my webcasts. It's on the slide. So if I go back to the Gantt chart, what just happened here? A couple of things happened. After linking the task, Microsoft Project, at least at this point, based on how I've set the dependencies, helped me figure out when these tasks should happen. Well, based on your task and dependencies, these are the dates I'd proposed. And again, this is still early. I haven't talked about resourcing yet. But I can have a good idea, wow, if this is the order I go through, looks like I'm going to be done on July 25th, at least for now. Now, there's a couple other cool things in Microsoft Project 2010. So notice that this doesn't look like the right order, right? Because I entered it aimlessly. Munir, how are tasks added into the critical path? You don't. Based on your dependencies, the critical path will be defined. You do not define the critical path. You find that out after you establish dependencies. Well, guess what, folks? Since there's a lot of questions about critical path, what we're going to do, I'll work with Catherine, and we'll do another presentation just talking about critical path. How's that? Okay? So I want to focus on looking at Microsoft Project at this point. But certainly I'd be more than happy to explain critical path to everybody. Okay? Okay, great. So one of the things I want to do now is make sure all these are in the right order. You see, all you have to do is ask. I'd be more than happy to do any kind of presentation. If only I can show cooking here, I'd be happy to do that too. But anyway, so I want to sort these tasks in the right dates in the right order. So what I could do is I can go to the View tab, and under Sort, I want to click on Sort by Start Date. Sort by Start Date, okay? Now, cooking with ducks. Hey, you can't tease me with that. I'll do it. By the way, there's a great cookbook coming out from O'Reilly, Cooking for Geeks. Read that book, helped technical edit that book. Really good book, so you guys have to get that book. Okay, so I did Sort by Start Date, and notice what happened. It rearranged the task based on when it should happen. And these dates are calculated by Microsoft Project for me. And that's one of the powers of Microsoft Project. Now, it gave me an idea when these things will happen. Now, another point, hey guys, listen, start typing in the chat pod, look at the screen. Do not ever touch these two columns. I know you can go in there and start putting in dates, but do not do it. If you see people doing it, slap their hands. That is a cardinal sin. Because if you do that, the scheduling engine won't be as ideal. If you really want to start changing dates here, then you got to go back to task modes and change it to manually scheduled, and then you change the dates yourself. But don't leave it at auto schedule and start changing the dates, because I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. It will go up the wazoo if you start changing duration of work and all that. So do not touch these two columns, all right? Okay, so now I've established dependencies. And one more thing I want to show before I take a quick break here. I want to go to Viewing. I'm going to click More Views. I want to show you Detail Again. Okay? Detail Again. Now I'm going to zoom out because, friends, this is really, really useful. So, I forgot to set the sorting order here. Let me sort it appropriately for everybody, so this won't keep changing anymore. Sort by start date and permanently renumber it. Okay, so there you go. All right, friends. If you look at this, again, the red are critical tasks, blue are non-critical. But notice that the non-critical one, it says here like 15 days. What that means is I have 15 days extra to play with for these blue tasks, meaning these blue tasks, let me take a blue task here, staffing. Staffing, we've scheduled to be 20 days, but if it took 25 days, I'm still cool. Project won't be behind. Getting equipment, if that took longer, as long as it's not more than 15 days, project would still be on schedule, okay? It won't be behind. So that's what we mean by non-critical tasks. Non-critical tasks have this thing called slack, okay? And if you want to see the raw numbers, friends, I can go to View, Tables, and I can look at Schedule, okay? So if I look at Schedule, check this out. It's going to tell me how much slack I have, how much slack I don't, which is cool, right? And that's very, very useful. So let me go back to my entry table. Another thing I use a lot is I use filtering. I show only that's critical because this makes a great case for me, especially when I ask for more resource. I go, look, management, customer, these tasks can't be behind because you want me to open this restaurant July 25. None of this can slip. If any of this slips, project will slip, okay? So, again, very, very wonderful tool to do what-if analysis and planning and whatnot. Okay, so, friends, here's what I'd like us to do. It's 2:05, or not 2:05 my time, 11:05 Pacific, and whatever time. Let's take a quick 5-minute break, and I'll reconvene after 5 minutes and look at the next step, okay? So we're on creating dependencies right now, and then we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. All right, friends? So let's take a quick break, grab a drink, and I'll see you in a while.